Hey guys, Grand J here, and welcome to our final Opus 4 set review. Today we'll be talking about the light and dark cards. There's not a lot of cards to go through, so it'll be a bit of a shorter video. So let's get started. First card to talk about is Cloud. So Cloud is a free cost 7,000 power forward, EX burst when Cloud enters the field. Choose one forward an opponent controls. If you control a category 7 forward other than Cloud, deal it 7,000 damage. It's also got an S ability, Beam Blade, so S, fire 1, dull. Choose one forward an opponent controls. Deal it 8,000 damage, and deal 4,000 damage to all the other forwards your opponent controls. So, this card has quite a good value package to it already. So, when it does come into play, you are getting a free cost 7,000 power forward, which is on curve, and then you're also getting the ability of dealing 7,000 damage if you have another Final Fantasy 7 character on the field. So there are quite a couple of combinations this card could play with. If you're playing just mono fire, you can generally have Tifa, Zack, or Rosso on the field, and they're all great ways to trigger off Cloud's ability. In addition, it's also an EX burst, so there will be times where your opponent, if they dull your forwards and then attack through, you might get this EX burst trigger to hit for 7k, and hitting for 7,000 damage is actually a very good number, hits a lot of mid-range forwards. So this card's a great value card. On top of this, it's got an S ability where you're able to deal 4,000 damage, to all your opponent's forwards, and 8,000 damage to one target. So this card's ability is very similar to Makana's from the previous set, but it kind of has its pros and cons. So on the pro side is that there are a lot of Cloud to work with, so you'll be able to trigger off this ability much more often than you would be able to with Makana. On the downside is that Makana does have the ability to chain more damage and effectively deal 8k to a whole lot of forwards. So you do have some pros and cons there. But if you do consider it as just like a small, medium-sized removal for 8,000 damage, that's actually a very good number to be hitting. And because Cloud can use S abilities very, very easily, this card's actually a very well-rounded package. So I'm not sure if this sort of replaces a 4-cost Cloud that we've seen from Opus 1. Maybe it does, but if it does, then it's a pretty good value, and this is going to be much more of a offensive play than more of a control play, whereas the previous 4-cost Cloud was more of a control card because Omni Slicer was kind of an expensive ability to use. Beam Blade is quite cheap, and Cloud has the very immediate ability when he comes into play. So this card's pretty good. If you want to build an FF7 deck, then this builds into it very well. If you going to play monocolor, this Cloud can slot between Fire Ice and Fire. Yeah, generally Fire Ice pretty well because you do have Genesis as support there and also the DGS soldiers. So that's pretty good. In addition, you're kind of not really locked into playing Fire. You're only using the Fire energy if you want to use S ability. So if you're just playing it as a 7k nuke, it's not too bad to just throw into an Ice deck that has Genesis or DGS soldiers in it. So that's pretty good synergy within itself. Next, we have Terra. It's a 4-cost legendary forward at 7,000 power. When Terra enters the field, you may search your deck for one summon of cost 5 or less and add it to your hand. And it's got an S ability. So S to dull, choose one forward, deal it 6,000 damage, search for one summon and add it to your hand. So this card is actually a really fun card to play with. We haven't had too many cards that allow you to interact with summons from your deck or search them from your deck, and Terra is one of the first cards to be able to do that. So its first ability to search for a summon of 5 or less is actually pretty good. If you consider that this card is a 4-cost for 7,000 and you're gaining 2 CP worth of value back, then you're getting a 7k for 2, which is pretty good value, and you can search for a very specific summon. And so yeah, in a lot of situations, this is a very good card to be playing. And yeah, so a lot of decks do rely the core of their strategy around their free to 4-cost summons. So this can give you the summons that you need in it that's core to your strategy, or this can search you for one of those very specific summons that you need in a certain situation, such as a Hecaton carry matchups when you need it, etc., etc. So its S ability of Riot Blade to choose a forward, deal at 6,000 damage isn't particularly too amazing because 6,000 isn't a huge amount of damage, but it does allow you to search for any summon from your deck. So if you do consider that, then this card is very good for searching for summons, and it's a very summon intensive deck. So even though we've currently got 2 other Terras and they're both in Ice, I definitely foresee this card will have its applications outside of Ice if you're willing to have a much smaller set of Terras to work with. That being said, it's not a very difficult thing to trigger off. Simply because there's plenty of ways to be able to interact with her. She's a Final Fantasy 6 character as well, so that's kind of another bonus as well. So yeah, this card's a great card. Being able to search for a summon using her S ability is great. Yeah, so you can use her to search for stuff like Ultima, which maybe if you run one in deck, then Terra is able to search that one specific Ultima that you need, put it down when you need to. So this might potentially also work into that water light Ultimate deck, so that's a pretty good way to sort of just buff that deck up as well. And yeah, this card's just great value, and it gives a whole lot of great utility by just being able to search for summons whenever you need to. Next is Kefka. It's a 5-cost Dark Heroic. It's got EX Burst. When Kefka enters the field, search for one monster and add it to your hand. And it's also got a dull ability. Until the end of the turn, all monsters you control also become forwards with 7,000 power. So this card is definitely going to be put into the monster-based deck. Making all your monsters 7,000 power does have its pros and cons. So on the pro side is that if you do build up like a small army of monsters, you can create a lot of like value straight away by having them all 7,000 power. It does make them vulnerable to your opponent's AoE spells, but if you're only doing it on your turn on offense, then you'll be able to turn them into 7,000 power forwards, attack with them, and then by the time your opponent's turn rolls around, they're all going to be monsters again, so your opponent like can't really use too many AoE abilities to sort of deal with them. Also, it's just like straight up relevant on defense as well. It's the fact that it's got EX burst, search for monster, basically makes it a free cost 8,000 power forward, which is again like very good value. So it seems like a lot of the cards in the set are having really good value in terms of like being a very strong body and having an EX burst on them as well. So yeah, so this card is very good in a monster deck. I do definitely foresee it like maybe being a 2-of. I probably wouldn't run free just because it becomes a little bit clunky at that stage. But the fact that it is like so good, I think that monster decks will play it. Yeah, there's no reason not to. And the final card for this set is Shadow Lord. So it's a legendary dark forward, 4 cost 8,000 power, so it's on curve. It's got Brave. When Shadow Lord enters the field, break all forwards of cost 2 or less. When a forward opponent controls is put from the field into break zone, choose one forward an opponent controls, deal it 2,000 damage. So a lot of people are talking this card up, and I don't really see why. So it's a 8,000 Brave, so that's kind of all right already. But its ability is very narrow. So only hitting forwards of cost 2 or less is a very small subsection of forwards. And for a dark card, you generally want it to be either a very core part of your strategy or a card that's going to be very impactful. And I don't really see that this ability is going to be particularly useful in a lot of your matchups. So in some matchups, it will be great, especially against Golbez. That's probably the matchup that it like craps on the hardest. But aside from that, it doesn't really add that much value. The additional value of like whenever a forward is broken, deal 2,000 damage. That's kind of not another huge bonus as well. So it's like 2,000 damage is a very minimal amount. If it was say 3 or 4k damage, then potentially we might be talking like, yeah, we might be talking more relevance. But right now, 2,000 damage isn't a lot, and only dealing with like 2 cost forwards or less isn't sort of like very viable. And because of that, I don't think that this card's going to see a lot of play. If like Golbez does see significantly more play, then maybe we might see some Shadow Lords. But besides from that, this card just doesn't seem like it's very good in a lot of matchups. And like because it's a dark card, you're going to have to find ways to pitch it, or you're forced to play it. And in those situations where you are forced to play, I don't foresee this card being like particularly good. Now that there's a lot of monsters, and monsters all have triggered or like activated abilities, then Emperor, 4 cost legendary Emperor is going to be much better. And I think in a lot of cases, if you want a 4 cost 8,000 power forward, in a lot of cases the Emperor is going to be a lot better for you, simply considering the current metagame. And I think trading off like Shadow Lord, Brave 8,000 for the Emperor is probably not worth it. And because of that, I don't think Shadow Lord's particularly good, and I don't think he's really going to see much play in the current metagame. And that's it. Super short video today, only talking about 4 cards, and that's it for all our Opus 4 set review. I hope you guys enjoyed the series. I know it's been a little bit long. I've been sort of working on this format, but now we can get to the good stuff. So I'll be putting a whole bunch of content up in the following weeks of all the cool decks I'm testing out. I'll be trying to aim for at least 1 every week, but potentially depending on how fast I get testing done and how much stuff I get done, I might be able to bump that up to 2 like deck videos during the week. So that'll be great. I'm looking forward to being able to put a lot of content out, and I hope I can share a lot of videos with you guys. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this series. Definitely like feel free to send me any sort of feedback or any sort of questions. Leave them in the comment section below. I do my best to respond to everything. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do enjoy it, please subscribe, thumbs up. I'll be putting a whole lot of content out. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Grand J out.